The planet Zarya was far from the civilized core worlds of the galaxy. Its red-orange skies burned like molten metal during the day, and at night, twin moons bathed the rocky landscape in cold silver light. Among the jagged cliffs and sprawling colonies, life was harsh. Only the strong, the clever, or the well-connected could thrive here, and for those who had neither family nor status, survival was a daily struggle. Lyra, a young alien orphan, knew this struggle better than anyone. She had no parents, no home, and no one to look after her. Her species, the Zareth, had always been a proud people, placing value on family, alliances, and social bonds. An orphan was considered incomplete, unworthy of respect, and often ignored or scorned. Lyra had felt this judgment in every glance, every whispered word, every deliberate avoidance. The other children in the colony teased her, and the adults either ignored her or scolded her for being in the way. She had learned to survive on her own. She scavenged scraps from abandoned buildings, drank from the shallow rivers that cut through the colony's edge, and slept in hidden nooks that offered just enough shelter from the harsh winds. Her small body was wiry but strong, honed by years of self-reliance. But no matter how strong she became, the loneliness gnawed at her. She longed for someone to care, someone who would see her for more than her orphaned status. One evening, as Lyra sat beneath the jagged cliffs watching the twin moons rise, she heard a faint hum of engines from above. She ducked instinctively, peeking from behind a rock. A human ship hovered above the colony, its metal surface glinting under Zarya's strange sunlight. Only a few humans ever came this far into the outer systems, and they were almost always officials, traders, or peacekeepers. From the ship emerged a tall figure, dressed in a uniform that carried both authority and practicality. Elias Grant, a human captain assigned to observe the colony for interstellar diplomatic reasons, had stepped onto the rocky surface. He scanned the area with careful eyes, noting the colony's layout, the movement of its inhabitants, and the small outlying structures. Humans were curious and observant, always looking for patterns and understanding the world in ways that often seemed foreign to the locals. As he walked toward the colony, Elias noticed movement near the cliffs, a small, shadowy figure. At first, he thought it might be one of the local children playing or hiding, but as he approached, he saw the fine features, the pointed ears, and the delicate frame of Lyra. She froze, her wide eyes reflecting fear and caution. Most people in the colony would have ignored her, or worse, laughed. But Elias saw something different. He saw vulnerability. Yes, but also intelligence and resilience. He knelt slightly, lowering his imposing frame so he seemed less threatening. "Hello," he said in a calm, gentle voice. "I'm not here to hurt you." Lyra's eyes narrowed, suspicion written across her face. "Why are you talking to me?" she asked, her voice small but firm. "Because I think everyone deserves someone to care about them," Elias replied. "Even if they are alone." Lyra studied him, unsure if she could trust him. She had learned that words often meant nothing. Actions mattered more. She waited silently as he reached into his pack and pulled out a small piece of ration bread. He held it out, careful not to make sudden movements. "You don't have to take it," he said, "but I want to help if I can." For a long moment, Lyra hesitated. Then, slowly, she stepped forward and took the bread. It wasn't much, but it felt like a lifeline. A small sign that someone might see her as more than just an orphan. Over the next few days, Elias returned to the cliffs at the same time each day. He brought small things, water, food, simple tools to make her shelter stronger. He never forced her to speak or act. He let her observe him, let her decide whether she could trust him. Slowly, Lyra began to open up, telling him bits about herself. She spoke of her parents, who had died when a starship accident had left her alone, of the other children who ignored her, and of the nights she spent under the twin moons wishing for a friend. Elias listened without judgment. He never pitied her, but he never dismissed her pain either. He shared stories of humans, of planets where orphans had thrived, and of ways people could help each other survive even in harsh environments. To Lyra, his stories were like sparks of warmth in a cold, lonely world. One evening, as the twin moons rose, Elias helped Lyra fix her makeshift shelter. The wind had torn one of the cloth panels, and the small space no longer protected her from the chill. Together, they reinforced it with scraps of metal and strong fabric he had brought. "You're clever," he said, smiling. "Not many would figure out how to make this work." Lyra felt a small sense of pride. "I have to," she replied softly. "If I don't, no one else will." Elias nodded, understanding the weight of her words. He had seen this resilience in humans too, in those who had nothing but still fought to survive. It was part of what made both humans and some alien species extraordinary, the will to keep going, to protect themselves and others when no one else would. The colony, however, did not approve of this growing relationship. The local officials had noticed Lyra's absence from the usual work groups and her presence near a human. Whispers began circulating, warnings about human interference and improper companionship. One official even sent word to Elias, telling him he had no right to involve himself with an orphan and that he should leave her alone. Elias frowned at the message. He understood the rules and customs of the Zareth, but he also knew what was right. Lyra was vulnerable and alone, and if he turned away, she could be lost to the cruelty and neglect that had marked her life so far. "I won't abandon her," he said quietly to himself. That night, as Lyra settled into her newly reinforced shelter, she felt a strange sense of safety. For the first time in her life, she did not feel completely alone. She looked up at the twin moons, thinking of the human who had chosen to care, even when the world had rejected her. She did not understand the full meaning of it, but she knew one thing. She had found someone who might see her as more than just a poor orphan. And for now, that was enough. The next morning, Elias arrived with more supplies and a small communicator device. "I want to help you contact the outside world," he said. "Not to send you away, but to make sure you are safe." Lyra hesitated. Trust did not come easily. But the way Elias had stayed, day after day, without demanding anything from her, convinced her. She took the communicator and let him show her how it worked. As they worked together, a small bond formed, not just of trust, but of understanding. Elias admired her intelligence and her determination. Lyra began to feel something she had never felt before, the possibility of being valued for who she truly was. But their peace was fragile. The colony's officials were watching. And while Elias believed in fairness, he also knew that actions had consequences. Standing beside an orphan in defiance of tradition could bring scrutiny, perhaps even danger. Yet he could not turn away. That evening, as the red-orange sky faded into the cold silver of night, Lyra whispered, almost to herself, "I wonder why you care." Elias smiled gently. "Because no one should be alone, Lyra. And because sometimes, helping someone is the most important thing a person can do." Lyra thought about those words long after he had left. They carried warmth she had never known, and hope she had almost forgotten. For the first time, she felt that maybe, just maybe, someone would stand by her. And far above the cliffs, the twin moons shone down, silent witnesses to the start of a bond that neither tradition nor prejudice could easily break. The next few days on Zaria were quieter, yet tense. Lyra's small shelter beneath the cliffs had become a sanctuary, a place where she could breathe without fear of ridicule. Elias continued his visits, bringing more supplies and stories of distant worlds. He taught her how to make simple tools, how to purify water from the rivers, and even how to identify edible plants on the outskirts of the colony. Lyra absorbed every lesson with a mixture of curiosity and determination. She had spent her life fending for herself, but Elias introduced her to a different way of survival, a way that combined courage with intelligence and strength with care. She began to realize that being alone didn't have to mean being powerless. One afternoon, while they were repairing the shelter's roof, Elias noticed movement in the colony below. Several Zareth youths were approaching the cliffs. They carried expressions of mischief and disdain, clearly intent on causing trouble. Lyra stiffened, her small body tensing with fear. "They're coming for me," she whispered. Elias glanced down. "Then we'll make sure you're ready." He handed her a small wooden staff he had crafted, its end reinforced with a strip of metal. "You don't need to fight them with anger. Just stay calm and use your head." The youths arrived, shouting and jeering. "Orphan! You don't belong here!" one of them called. Another tossed a small stone toward the shelter, hitting the roof with a sharp clang. Lyra flinched but held her ground, gripping the staff tightly. Elias stepped forward, his presence commanding and steady. "Back off," he said, his voice firm but not harsh. "She is under my protection now. Anyone who harms her will answer to me." The youths hesitated, unsure how to respond to a human intervening in their traditions. The Zareth respected strength and authority, and humans were considered outsiders, sometimes clever, sometimes unpredictable. Elias's calm confidence made them pause. "She's just an orphan," one of the older boys muttered, trying to regain his courage. "No one cares about her." Elias shook his head. "I care. And that should matter more than your rules." "I care. I care." Lyra watched him, a strange warmth blooming in her chest. She had never imagined someone standing up for her like this, not because of fear, not because of obligation, but because they wanted to. The youths muttered among themselves, glanced at each other, and finally backed away, grumbling. Once they left, Elias turned to her. "You did well," he said. "You didn't let fear control you. That's important." Lyra nodded silently, her usual mistrust beginning to soften. She realized that Elias wasn't just teaching her survival skills. He was teaching her to believe in herself. That evening, they sat beneath the shelter, the twin moons casting their pale glow over the rocky cliffs. Lyra pulled a small piece of cloth from her pack and began weaving it into a pattern she had seen in the colony. Elias watched quietly, admiring her focus and patience. "You're very skilled," he said after a while. "Most people would give up halfway. But you keep going." Lyra shrugged. "I don't have anyone to give up for. Everything I do for myself." Elias nodded, understanding the weight of her words. "I think that's why you're stronger than most people I've met. But strength isn't just about surviving alone. It's about knowing when to let someone help you." Lyra looked at him, unsure what to say. She had never relied on anyone before, and the idea felt both strange and comforting. The next morning, Elias brought something new, a small holographic communicator. "I want you to be able to talk to me if I'm not here," he explained. "It's not much, but it will help you feel safer." Lyra hesitated, touching the smooth device. Communication had always been limited for her. The colony had rules, and most adults refused to speak to orphans except to scold or ignore them. But Elias had always been different. He treated her as an equal, as someone worthy of attention and care. She nodded slowly. "Thank you," she whispered. Elias smiled. "You don't need to thank me. I'm here because I want to be." Days passed, and their bond deepened. Elias taught Lyra about the wider galaxy, about human civilizations and other alien worlds. He showed her maps, diagrams, and even simple experiments to test gravity and energy. Lyra's curiosity bloomed, and she began to see possibilities beyond the cliffs and the colony that had once confined her. One afternoon, while exploring a small cave near her shelter, Lyra found a patch of rare plants that glowed faintly under the twin moons. She had never seen anything like them. Excited, she called Elias over. "These are lumina plants," he said, examining them closely. "They're rare even on other planets." "You discovered them on your own, that's impressive." Lyra beamed. For the first time, she felt that her efforts, her curiosity, and her intelligence were being recognized and appreciated. She wasn't invisible. She wasn't unworthy, and for the first time, she allowed herself to imagine a future where she might belong somewhere. But not everyone was pleased with her growing confidence. The colony elders had been observing the unusual relationship between the orphan and the human. Some were concerned that Elias's influence might disrupt traditional customs. Rumors began to spread. Whispers about a human interfering with Zareth traditions. About an orphan being given attention she didn't deserve. One day, an elder approached Elias while he was helping Lyra repair a small water purifier. "You are overstepping your bounds," the elder said, his voice tight with disapproval. "This orphan is not yours to protect. The colony has rules. You cannot ignore them." Elias looked up calmly. "I understand your concerns. But Lyra's life is at risk if I do nothing. Rules do not change the fact that she needs help." The elder's eyes narrowed. "And what of our customs? Do you expect us to bend them for a human? You may think you are helping, but you are interfering with our society." Elias met the elder's gaze steadily. "Sometimes, what is right is more important than what is customary. She is a person, not a rule, and I will not abandon her." The elder turned and left, muttering under his breath. Elias knew the scrutiny would continue, but he also knew he had made the right choice. Lyra's safety and trust were more important than appeasing those who could not see beyond tradition. That night, Lyra confided in Elias. "Do you think they will ever accept me?" she asked, her voice small. Elias knelt beside her, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Perhaps. But even if they don't, you have me. And sometimes, that is enough. We'll face them together." Lyra felt a warmth in her chest she had never felt before. She had always been alone, always been ignored, always been unimportant. But now, she had someone who believed in her, someone who chose to stay by her side no matter what. The following days were filled with learning, exploration, and preparation. Elias taught Lyra how to use small tools to defend herself if needed, how to navigate the rocky terrain safely, and how to observe the colony without drawing unwanted attention. Lyra was quick to learn, her mind sharp, and her instincts strong. She began to feel capable, not just of surviving, but of thriving. One evening, as the twin moons rose high, Elias and Lyra sat outside her shelter, watching the stars. "Do you ever think about what it would be like to leave this place?" Elias asked. His voice quiet. Lyra nodded. "Sometimes. I wonder if there's more for me beyond the cliffs and the colony." Elias smiled. "There is. And one day, we'll see it together. But for now, we stay. We survive. We grow. And we protect each other." Lyra looked at him, her heart swelling with a mix of hope and trust. She realized that life could be more than just a series of hardships. It could also be filled with care, guidance, and connection. And for the first time, she allowed herself to believe that she was worthy of those things. The twin moons shone down, casting a gentle light over the cliffs and the small shelter. Lyra leaned against Elias, feeling safe and seen in a way she had never been before. The colony's whispers and rules could wait. Tonight, she had someone who mattered, and that made all the difference. And high above the cliffs, the stars stretched endlessly, promising a world far larger than her small, lonely life. A world that she might one day explore with Elias by her side. Life on Zarya had changed for Lyra. The cliffs that once seemed lonely and threatening now felt like a small world of safety, a place where she could breathe and learn. Elias continued to visit every day, bringing knowledge, tools, and care. Their bond had grown deeper, built on trust, patience, and shared moments of quiet courage. But the colony had not forgotten them. Whispers and curious glances followed Lyra wherever she went. The elders were watching, assessing how a human and an orphaned Zareth could challenge their traditions. Lyra noticed the tension, and she often asked Elias, "Do they like me now? Or are they just waiting for me to fail?" Elias smiled gently. "Some may never understand. But what matters is that you know your worth, Lyra. That's what makes you strong." One morning, as the twin moons faded and the orange sunlight crept over the cliffs, Lyra noticed a sudden pall of worry in Elias's expression. He was examining a small medical device, one he had brought from his ship to monitor the health of anyone under his care. "What is it?" she asked, her voice tinged with concern. "There's a virus spreading in the colony," he said softly. "It's rare, but it can be dangerous, especially for young or vulnerable Zareth." Lyra's stomach tightened. She had always been vulnerable, living on the edge, without proper food, shelter, or care. "Am I in danger?" Elias shook his head. "You might be. That's why I'm going to stay close and help you. We'll be careful together." Over the next days, Elias monitored the colony, noting signs of illness and preparing medicines and remedies using both human and Zareth knowledge. He taught Lyra how to recognize symptoms, how to use herbal solutions, and how to stay clean in a place where water was limited and hygiene was a constant challenge. But one afternoon, Lyra began to feel weak. Her legs trembled, and a strange heat spread through her body. She tried to hide it, not wanting Elias to worry. But he noticed immediately. "You're running a fever," he said, placing a hand on her forehead. His touch was gentle but firm, grounding her fear. "We need to act fast." Together, they worked to stabilize her. Elias prepared a combination of human antiviral treatments and Zareth herbal medicine, carefully monitoring her reactions. Lyra's breathing grew shallow, and her small body shook, but Elias never wavered. He stayed beside her, keeping her calm with quiet words and steady care. Hours passed like this, filled with tension and fear. Lyra felt her energy draining, and for the first time in years, she allowed herself to lean on someone else completely. She did not have to fight alone. Finally, as night fell and the twin moons rose, her fever broke. She lay in her small shelter, exhausted but alive. Elias smiled, relief washing over him. "You're strong, Lyra. You've done so well." Lyra looked at him, a mixture of gratitude and wonder in her eyes. I couldn't have done this without you." Elias shook his head. "No, Lyra. You did this yourself. I just helped guide you. You have strength inside you that others may never see." As she rested, Lyra noticed something strange, a warmth in her chest whenever Elias was near, a feeling she couldn't fully name. It was not just trust or gratitude, it was deeper, more subtle, a connection that went beyond words. She pushed the thought aside, focusing on recovery. The following day, Elias returned with more observations and discoveries. While helping Lyra adjust a small monitoring device, he noticed something unusual in her biology. "Lyra," he said carefully, "I think there's something special about you that others might not understand." Lyra tilted her head, curious. "What do you mean?" "You have a rare trait," Elias explained. "It's genetic, something that allows you to bond deeply with someone compatible. Your species may have misunderstood it, and that's why the colony treated you so harshly. They didn't see your uniqueness, they only saw rules and expectations." Lyra frowned. "Bond? Compatible?" She had heard stories about Zareth bonds, about partnerships that were formalized according to tradition. But she had never thought she would be part of such a thing. Elias nodded. "Yes, but it's not just about tradition or rules. It's about trust, care, and understanding. And I think you have a rare chance to experience that fully, with someone who truly sees you." Lyra felt a mixture of fear and hope. She had never known anyone to see her in this way, never had anyone acknowledge her worth beyond her orphan status. The idea that she might have a special bond, that someone could choose her for who she truly was almost overwhelming. Over the next few days, Elias continued to teach her about her own biology and capabilities. He explained how her rare trait could allow her to connect with someone in ways others couldn't, providing emotional and even physical synergy. Lyra listened intently, fascinated by the possibility, but also cautious. Trust had been hard to come by in her life, and she wondered if this connection was something real or just another set of rules she could fail to meet. Their moments together grew more intimate in small, safe ways. They shared meals, examined plants and rocks, and spoke quietly under the twin moons. Elias taught her about human culture, about compassion, courage, and the importance of standing by those who cannot defend themselves. Lyra began to see that humans, despite being outsiders, had qualities that could surpass her own species in kindness and understanding. One evening, as they were repairing the shelter's roof together, Lyra spoke softly. "Do you really care for me?" Elias paused, considering his words. "Yes, Lyra. I care for you because you are brave, smart, and kind. Because you deserve to be seen, not just judged. And because I believe in protecting those who cannot protect themselves." Lyra's eyes widened. She had never been spoken to this way. Never felt someone care for her without expectation or judgment. Her heart swelled with emotion she had never understood fully. She wanted to trust him completely, but old fears tugged at her. Elias noticed her hesitation. "It's okay to be cautious," he said. "You've had a hard life, but I will stay. I will not leave you." Those words, simple as they were, changed something inside Lyra. She felt a sense of safety and belonging she had never known, and as they worked together under the pale moonlight, she began to understand the depth of the bond forming between them. But just as hope seemed to grow, tension returned from the colony. Officials had noticed her prolonged absence from usual duties and her close connection with a human. Rumors began circulating, and some Zareth adults started to question Elias's influence. One afternoon, an elder confronted them near the cliffs. "This human is teaching you things you do not need," he said to Lyra. "You must return to your place in the colony, to the duties and customs assigned to you. You cannot ignore your status as an orphan." Lyra felt fear rising, but Elias stood firmly beside her. "No," he said. "Lyra has the right to learn, to grow, and to be safe. Her value is not determined by outdated rules. She has a gift, a rare ability, and she deserves protection, not punishment." The elder's eyes narrowed. "You may be human, but you will not undermine our ways." Elias held his ground. "I do not seek to undermine. I seek to protect. If you cannot see that, it is your failing, not hers." The elder glared, then turned away, muttering warnings. Elias exhaled, knowing the scrutiny would continue. But he also knew they had taken an important step. Lyra had been acknowledged, defended, and her uniqueness recognized. And that recognition was powerful. It changed how she saw herself. That night, under the twin moons, Lyra whispered, almost to herself. Elias smiled, his hand resting lightly on hers. "You can. And together, we will face whatever comes next." For the first time in her life, Lyra felt the possibility of a future where she was not just an orphan on the outskirts of a harsh colony, but someone valued, someone capable, someone seen. The bond she shared with Elias was more than protection. It was understanding, respect, and care. And somewhere deep inside, she began to sense that their connection was rare, something that might change both of their lives in ways neither had fully imagined. The twin moons shone above, quiet witnesses to the beginning of a bond that was as extraordinary as it was fragile, a bond built not on rules, but on trust, courage, and human kindness. The days following Lyra's recovery passed in a mixture of quiet routines and cautious observation. The colony elders had not forgotten the human who protected the orphan, and their scrutiny lingered like a shadow over the cliffs. But Elias and Lyra continued their lessons and explorations, their bond growing stronger with each shared moment. Lyra had begun to understand more about herself, about her rare trait, and about the possibility of a bond that transcended rules and prejudice. Elias's guidance had taught her not only survival skills but also the meaning of trust, respect, and care. She felt stronger than ever before, physically, mentally, and emotionally, but she also felt something new, a sense of belonging that she had never known. One morning, Elias arrived with a proposal. "Lyra," he said, "there's a group of scientists from my ship who study rare species and unusual genetics. They want to learn about you but not to exploit you. To help you, to understand your abilities, and to protect you in the future. You can choose to meet them, or you can continue your life here. Lyra hesitated, unsure whether she was ready to be seen beyond the cliffs. But she looked at Elias, trusting his judgment, and nodded. "I want to learn," she said softly. Together, they journeyed to a small research station at the edge of the colony. The scientists were polite and curious, treating Lyra with the respect she had never received in the colony. They explained her rare trait, how it allowed for deep bonding, and how it had been misunderstood by the Zareth. Lyra listened carefully, absorbing every word, realizing that her uniqueness was not a curse but a gift. While they examined her safely and respectfully, Lyra noticed Elias watching her with pride, his confidence and care unwavering. She felt a surge of warmth in her chest, a mixture of gratitude, affection, and something she could not yet name. She realized that he had always been by her side, not for duty, not for orders, but because he chose to be there. The visit ended, and they returned to the cliffs. Lyra felt a sense of empowerment she had never experienced. She had survived illness, defied tradition, and discovered her true abilities. And throughout it all, Elias had been her constant companion. But the colony's scrutiny had not ended. Whispers grew louder, and some Zareth adults began to question their customs. They watched the bond between human and orphan with suspicion, unsure how to interpret it. One afternoon, a group of elders approached the cliffs, their expressions stern but cautious. "Lyra," one elder began, "your bond with this human, it defies tradition. We do not understand it. Why does he protect you?" Lyra took a deep breath, standing taller than she had ever stood before. "Because he sees me as I am," she said, "not as an orphan, not as someone to ignore, but as someone who has value and strength. He cares for me because it is right to care for those who cannot protect themselves. That is enough." The elders exchanged glances, uncertain how to respond. Elias stepped forward, his voice calm and steady. "I do not seek to change your customs. I seek only to protect Lyra. She is intelligent, brave, and capable. She deserves respect and safety, and I will not abandon her." There was silence for a moment. Then, one elder spoke, his tone softer. Perhaps we have judged too quickly. Perhaps strength is not always found in tradition alone." The words, though cautious, were a small victory. Lyra felt her heart lift. For the first time, the colony seemed willing to reconsider their assumptions. Over the next few weeks, change came slowly. The whispers became conversations. Some Zareth began to acknowledge Lyra's abilities and her unique bond with Elias. They saw her courage, her intelligence, and her resilience, and they began to understand that this bond, though unusual, was rooted in care, trust, and mutual respect, qualities they could admire, even if they did not fully understand. One evening, as the twin moons rose, Lyra and Elias sat outside the shelter, watching the stars. The cliffs were quiet, the air filled with a sense of peace that had been absent for so long. "Do you think they will ever fully accept us?" Lyra asked softly. Elias looked at her, his eyes reflecting the moonlight. "Some may never understand completely," he said. "But that does not matter. What matters is that we know our bond is real, and that is stronger than any rule or tradition." Lyra leaned against him, feeling a sense of warmth and safety she had never known. She realized that this bond was not just about protection, it was about understanding, respect, and shared courage. It was about someone seeing her for who she truly was and choosing to stay by her side. The next day, they returned to the colony to continue their daily routines. But this time, Lyra walked with a quiet confidence. She no longer flinched at stares or whispers. She had survived hardship, illness, and rejection, and she had emerged stronger. Elias walked beside her, his presence a steady reminder that she was never truly alone. As they moved through the colony, children and adults alike began to notice the change. Lyra's strength and intelligence became undeniable, and even those who had once mocked her could not ignore her courage. Elias's example had shown them that humans could act with fairness, understanding, and moral courage. The colony began to see that perhaps there was more to value than strict adherence to tradition. One afternoon, a small group of children approached Lyra. "Can we help you with your work?" one asked shyly. Lyra smiled, realizing that she could now inspire others, just as Elias had inspired her. She accepted their help, teaching them what Elias had taught her about the cliffs, the plants, and survival. The children listened eagerly, and Lyra felt a sense of pride she had never known. That evening, as they returned to their shelter, Lyra spoke softly to Elias. "I think I am ready to see the wider world, to explore, to learn, and to grow with you." Elias nodded, a smile lighting his face. "And we will, Lyra. Together. No matter what challenges we face them side by side." The twin moons shone above, casting their gentle glow over the cliffs and the small shelter. Lyra felt a sense of hope and possibility that she had never imagined. She was no longer just a poor orphan living on the outskirts of the colony. She was strong, capable, and seen. She had a bond that transcended tradition, a bond built on care, trust, and understanding. And as they looked at the stars together, she realized something extraordinary. In Elias, she had found not just a protector, but a companion who chose her, who believed in her, and who would stand by her no matter what. And in that choice, Lyra found a new family, a new home, and a new beginning. For the first time in her life, she felt truly free. The colony would continue to change slowly, but Lyra no longer feared their judgment. She had learned that courage, kindness, and the willingness to stand for what is right could inspire change, even in the most rigid societies. And she had learned that the human beside her was not just an ally, but a friend, a guide, and someone who could help her discover the full potential of her own strength. Together, they watched the twin moons rise high in the sky, their light reflecting on the cliffs, on the small shelter, and on the faces of two beings who had found something rare and beautiful: trust, understanding, and a bond that could survive anything. And far above, the stars stretched endlessly, promising a future filled with adventure, learning, and hope. A future that Lyra and Elias would explore together, side by side, no longer alone, no longer afraid, and no longer bound by the limits of the past. In the end, the orphan who had once been ignored and rejected had become a symbol of courage and resilience. And the human who had chosen to care had shown the colony the best of what humanity could offer. Their story was one of trust, bravery, and compassion. A story of how connection and understanding could change lives, cross worlds, and inspire hope for the future. And as the night settled over the cliffs, Lyra knew with certainty that no matter what came next, she would face it with Elias by her side. And together, they would create a world where care, courage, and kindness mattered more than rules or fear.